Hello, everyone, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 5 of the Big at the Back podcast. My name's Tom. I'm here with a jubilant Matthew Higgins. Matt, how are you?
I'm very good, and I don't even really know why. I just enjoyed the intro and had a little dance along. We are 4 days away from the start of the Premier League season, which I still don't think I'm ready for. It's been an absolute... the summer just feels like it hasn't happened. And it was great yesterday watching the women win the Euros as well. I actually sat down and watched that whole game, and it was a bit of a rollercoaster affair, going no extra time, but a great performance and good to finally see an English team lifting a trophy. What about you? How are you?
Yeah, all good. The women yesterday were great. I think everyone enjoyed watching them and watching England actually playing well for once. I mean, we haven't seen that since 1996, I would think. But yeah, all good. I don't feel ready for the start of the new season. I feel like it's come too quickly. So I just don't really know what to make of it. Well, I don't feel ready.
Not the only thing that's come too quickly.
Oh, get over yourself. Right. So, starting very strong, as Matt has just pointed out. But yeah, all good. I'm not ready for the season to start, and I barely know the fixtures. So this is going to be a case of going through game week 1, probably for somewhat of the first time for us, and just evaluating what we think is going to happen. But other than that, FPL-wise, it's more I don't feel like I'm ready. I haven't really tinkered all that much, or nearly as much as I'm used to. So I'm not 100% confident in my side, which I feel like I really should be at this point.
I'm the same. I feel like I set up my team initially, and I've probably made it about 10 transfers in the several weeks that have passed since. I'm sure by the time Friday afternoon comes round, my entire afternoon will be devoted to tinkering, making little changes here and there, probably bringing Mo Salah in and just changing everything. Like the 15 that I currently have, I'll probably be about 12 different.
Yeah, absolutely. And Friday afternoon will also be about making as many long-term season bets as we can. I haven't done any yet. I know I've missed the championship start. By the way, that was a great game, Burnley versus Huddersfield. And Burnley looking really good for the first time in ages as well. But yeah, I don't know what my season predictions are going to be yet either, and therefore what my season bets are going to be. I expect I'll probably do something like... I don't want to say City to win the league because that's boring, but we'll see. Maybe a go Kane top scorer. I think that's probably a decent shout over the course of the season.
Yeah, I like to do a little ACCA through, and I normally do it the week before the Premier League starts. So I'll let the week 1 of the Football League start, and I'll do like a Premier League winner, Championship, League 1, League 2, and maybe the National League as well. Chuck on an each way, like a £5 each way, and if it comes in, you normally get big returns. I think once I got 3 out of the 5 came in, but then I think I had Sunderland to win League 1 and they finished about 7th because Sunderland are always shit.
But they are responsible for the greatest football documentary of all time, Sunderland Till I Die. I think the best part of that documentary was watching them all hype themselves up. We're going to bounce straight back into the Premier League. We're going to be amazing. We're a huge club. We know what we're doing. Then they lost the first game 5-0. So if you haven't watched it, Sunderland Till I Die is fantastic and really, really worth watching.
It is honestly fantastic. The only thing that, I wouldn't say we'll overtake it because they actually got their act together last season, but the All or Nothing Arsenal documentary comes out later this week as well, which should be an interesting watch. I think that comes out on Thursday.
I mean, you're saying it. I hate the narrative that they got their act together because they messed up and bottled last season. So I really just want to watch that. People are saying, "Oh, Arsenal are looking good. They're doing really well." Well, they're not if you look at results. But who knows? We'll wait and see. Pre-season has been going though. How do you judge the pre-season when you're thinking football and FPL, Matt?
I pay very little attention to pre-season in general. Like you've seen some players have really hit the ground running. Gabriel Jesus is the one that everyone's talking about. I think he's hit 70% ownership today in FPL. Yeah, he looks good. He scored a hat-trick in the Emirates Cup at the weekend. But I always think, in general, ignore pre-season for the most part. As a West Ham fan, I can almost guarantee if we have a good pre-season, it will mean we'll start the season terribly. And if we have an underwhelming pre-season, we'll start pretty well. So it's all just fitness work for those sort of few weeks before the season starts. Obviously, we had the Community Shield on Saturday as well. That one you can maybe put a little bit more stock in because it's a glorified friendly, but it is a slightly more competitive game.
I mean, with the Community Shield, I've never cared about it. I'm a Liverpool fan. Now Liverpool have won it. It's the most important trophy in England. It means more than the FA Cup, than the League. I mean, it probably means about the same as the FA Cup and League Cup. I hate them as well. But yeah, I think you're right. Community Shield people at least try somewhat to win it, but they're not too bothered. What I quite found enjoyable, though, about the preseason was seeing Frank Lampard coming out and absolutely slating his own players after losing 4-0. Was it? I think it was an American team, Miami or someone like that. They lost 4-0 in a preseason game with their strongest 11. Then Frank Lampard came out and started throwing his players under the bus. It's like, you should not be doing that. It's a friendly. It's basically there to work on fitness. I don't think you understand how the preseason works.
I mean, it's Frank Lampard. You look at him, and he's the sort of man that always goes all of the pitch. And you can sometimes see that with managers that were very good players. It's hard to understand when other players aren't as good as they were.
Yeah, very much thinks of that. But regardless, what we're going to do for this episode, because we are very close to the start, is dive into the Gameweek 1 fixtures. And based on what we've seen and what we know of the clubs at this early stage, we're going to talk through the games and give our expectations for them. So why don't we kick off with you, and we'll start with the Friday night game that you and I are going to watch, which is Crystal Palace versus Arsenal.
This is the first game of the season is always so hard to predict. I mean, last season we kicked off, it was Arsenal again on the Friday night away at Brentford and lost 3-0. And that was the start of their terrible start to the season. They've obviously made a few good signings over the summer, Jesus, Zinchenko and Vieira being the main big ones. Jesus has sort of come in and hit the ground running. Zinchenko hasn't really featured much yet because he only signed about 10 days ago, I think. So they've made a few good signings. They look a good side so far this season. As I say, Jesus is the big asset in FPL at the moment, like over 70% ownership. Palace obviously had a good record last season. I think they got 4 points off Arsenal, if memory serves me rightly. Patrick Vieira obviously going back against his old club. It's going to be an interesting one. They haven't made many signings, so they're sort of looking, but they have got a young side anyway. So it's such a hard one to predict. So I think if I was putting money on it, I'd still be leaning towards Arsenal, even though they are away from home. But I'm just looking forward to actually watching it, to be honest with you, like getting the Premier League season back underway. I think it could be a good game. Like Selhurst Park, under the lights, it's always a good atmosphere.
Yeah, it's one of those games that you look at and it's never an easy game, but Arsenal should be expected to win. During pre-season, Arsenal have looked really good. Gabriel Jesus has been awesome for them, combining really well with Martinelli, actually. So I think it's got all the makings of quite a tight game if we're looking at it objectively, but obviously what we want to see is Arsenal losing 3-0 again.
Oh, that would be fantastic. That would make my day.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, I think Arsenal are a really good early investment team. Their fixtures at the beginning of the season are looking very good. If you look at the first 7 games on the fixture difficulty rating on FPL, the only one that's a red, so the hardest level or second hardest level, is game week 6 when they play Manchester United. Now, I'm not sure that's that tough of a game given Man U of last season. So they've got really, really good opening fixtures. Bournemouth and Fulham in there as well, Everton in there. So I think Arsenal are definitely a team to invest in initially. And it's almost a shame because Palace are the opposite. 3 of their first 4 are Arsenal, Liverpool and Man City. So I think after that, the fixtures get slightly better, or maybe from game week 8 onwards, they get slightly better. But I think Palace, unfortunately, from an FPL standpoint, aren't a team we want to be looking at, even for the first game week.
So you're saying don't get Wilf Zaha in? Is that what you're telling me?
Except for Wilf Zaha, if your name is Matt Higgins. I don't think from an FPL standpoint you can look at Palace, given the fixtures, unfortunately. But that would probably change on the first wildcard week, which is going to be game week 8 for all of those that haven't been paying as avid attention to FPL as we have. But I'm seeing an Arsenal win here. I'm seeing a boring 1-0 win, being completely transparent. But who knows? Maybe Palace can pull a surprise up.
I think it wouldn't surprise me if you saw goals, to be honest with you. I mean, I also wouldn't be surprised if it was a 1-0 either way. But from memory, both games last season were quite open and entertaining. I think there was a late goal in at least one of them for the game at the Emirates. So I think both teams, especially now Palace under the era, both teams like to play open and expansive football and attacking football. So hopefully that translates into a good, entertaining game for the neutrals.
Well, I hope so, because it's the opening game. Let's move on to talk about the Saturday games then. And the early kickoff is Fulham versus Liverpool. Now, I know you don't captain the early kickoff, but is there anyone in the world that's got the balls to not captain Mo Salah for this game? I don't think so.
I think if you've got him, you're captaining him, aren't you? Let's be honest. I think. Yeah. And is it technically the early kickoff if it's not the second game of the week? Surely the Palace Arsenal game's the early kickoff.
Who knows? And all of the highest scoring game weeks last year were ones that started with a Friday night kickoff as well. I'm not sure if that has anything to go with, but you never know. I think this, unfortunately for Fulham, well, it looks like they're getting Bernd Leno over the line, but he's not going to be tuned in enough to be starting this game. And Fulham are still going to be starting with Tim Ream at centre-back. Now, Tim Ream is not a Premier League standard defender. So they are in real trouble coming up against this Liverpool attack. And I think this is going to be a bit of a whitewash. I think when they sign another centre-back, they're in for a few, then they'll be competent and up for it. But I think if you haven't got 3 Liverpool assets going into the first game week, you're digging yourself a bit of a hole here, because this is going to be, I wouldn't say an easy game. Fulham will be up for it, but it will certainly be a game where you'd expect Liverpool to come away with all 3 points and a hatful of goals.
Big time. Yeah, if you haven't got 3 Liverpool assets, regardless of who they are, then I think you need to rethink things. But that could have been said for at any point over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, to be honest with you. I think Fulham have made a couple of good signings. Kevin Mbabu, who has just signed from Wolfsburg, is a decent right back. And they've signed Andreas Pereira from Man United, who is, a lot of people are looking at him as like a cheap enabler for their fantasy teams this season. So I think there's you could be going well to have him in there. But let's be honest, you look at the two sides, you look at Liverpool over the last few seasons, you look at how suspect it is that they always get a newly promoted team on the first game of the season. There is no way that it's random. I am not having it for a single second that they always get an easy start, but I won't go on too long about that.
It's almost like in a full season, everyone plays everyone else twice except Liverpool.
No, but I think it's the last 5 or 6 years you played a newly promoted team on the first game of the season. If it was random, there is no way that would happen.
Who cares? Genuinely, Liverpool beat everyone in the league, so it doesn't matter if we play someone newly promoted or not. So, and everyone plays everyone twice. I don't get this complaining. It's like when Klopp complains about the fixtures. It's like, oh, shut up.
Form matters. Form does matter. If you get 3 easy games to start the season and you get your confidence up and your form up, you carry that into your next game if that's a harder game. Whereas if you play a hard team first up and you get a test and you get beaten, it's going to be harder to bounce back.
Everton won their first 3 games last season, and look at them for the rest of the season. Spurs, under Nuno, won their first 3 games, including against Man City. Don't tell me form matters in the Premier League. We can agree to disagree on this one, I think.
I mean, it does matter to an extent. There's only so much. You can't, that's like saying, oh, you've won 3 games in a row, you've got to win every game forever. That just doesn't happen.
I mean, I can't believe you don't believe that happens. Let's move on, because I think Liverpool versus Fulham is self-explanatory. You need 3 Liverpool assets, especially at the moment while Fulham haven't got their defence sorted. So let's leave it there and move on to Bournemouth versus Aston Villa. Now, my dad's a lifelong Fulham fan, so I have an inbuilt hatred of Scott Parker. I think he's a terrible football manager and just a really rubbish human. You, as a West Ham fan, probably have an opposite thought.
I mean, I think rubbish human's a bit harsh. Do you know the bloke?
I mean, my dad feels like he knows him because he spent so much time hating him. So it's a bit of residual hatred there, I think.
I don't mind Parker. He was fantastic as a player for West Ham. He was one of the only shining lights in a team that was battling relegation for a good couple of years. Obviously went on to bigger and better things. Like some of the teams he's played for over his career as well. He was obviously a class player, but Management, I don't know. It doesn't seem to have suited him that well so far. Not in the Premier League anyway. He seems like an all right Championship manager, but I just don't think he's potentially cut out for the Premiership. And I think we'll see that again. They've barely signed anyone coming up. I looked at their side that started their friendly at the weekend, and it looks like a Championship side.
Worth noting that they spent loads of money in January to get promoted, essentially, and now they've got absolutely no budget left. So I think they've spent 12 million on a guy from Middlesbrough, and that's it. So I see Bournemouth going straight back down and straight back into the Championship, probably coming bottom. They won the most games in the Championship last season, or they won with clean sheets. Fulham, for all their brilliant attack, couldn't keep a clean sheet. But if you look at Bournemouth, Dom Solanke got 29 goals, but that aside, I don't think there's anyone with any kind of goals right there. I've said it earlier in the season as well. Bournemouth are not going to be a team that score a load of goals. They'll keep some clean sheets, but they'll still ultimately come 20th, I think.
Yeah, I think Dom Solanke is one of those players that is sort of like too good for the Championship, not good enough for the Premiership. He's in that in-between area. You've seen several of them down the years. They defensively, they're a little bit more solid. One player they have picked up this summer, ex-West Ham player, Ryan Fredericks, who was out of contract. So, I mean, he's an all right player. He's quick, but he's not the best defensively. But he should be. He'll be a good enough standard for a Bournemouth side. I just can't see them. I can't see them staying up. I just don't think they've got enough about them. They've not got enough in the middle. I think they're going to lose a lot of battles in the midfield. They've got a bit of a blunt attack force, and they've got an all right defence. So that just doesn't scream survival to me.
Totally agree. They're up against Aston Villa, who have looked very good in pre-season. Liam Bailey has been scoring a lot. He's 5 million on FPL, so he's a really, really good option for anyone out there. Ollie Watkins could potentially have a very good season, but I feel like we're always saying that about Ollie Watkins. The fullbacks, Cash and Digne, I think are still really good options at 5 million. Digne in particular, I think, is being underrated. So I don't see much wrong with anyone wanting to go in on the Aston Villa assets, especially for game week 1.
I completely agree. Fullbacks are probably the way to go. Potentially, I mean, a lot of people have spoken about Coutinho, and you've spoken about Coutinho, and he had a lot of blanks at the end of last season. But if he can find the form that he had when he first signed, then he's obviously going to be taking a lot of attention. But they've done some really good business this summer. Diego Carlos from Sevilla is a very good defender, and Boubacar Kamara from Marseille on a free transfer. That could be value for money. Like, as a free transfer, that could be one of the signings of the summer. I think he is a fantastic player.
Yeah. Totally agree. They're quite astute with their business as well. Looking at the next game then, this is a very interesting one because we're looking at Leeds versus Wolves. Now, Leeds have lost Calvin Phillips to Man City. They've lost Rafinha to Barcelona, and they've replaced them with good players. But I think they're really, really going to struggle this season. What it's going to hinge on, whether they stay up or not, is if Patrick Bamford stays fit, they'll have enough to get up to 14th or 15th. If he doesn't, they go straight down.
I'm not going to disagree with that. I mean, Jesse Marsh has been signing some of his players. He signed two Americans, Brendan Aronson and Tyler Adams, both who he sort of worked with previously. So, and they could be interesting. I mean, I saw Brendan Aronson's assist from the weekend where he played an absolutely beautiful ball with the outside of his right foot. Like, that was just pure class. So they have spent quite a bit of money. Obviously, they got the Rafinha money and the Phillips money. They seem to have reinvested it on sort of a wider pool of players, which I think they needed because they really struggled last season with a few key injuries, and that's what really killed them in going into the second half of the season. So I'd like to think that they bounce back a bit, but I really don't know enough about Jesse Marsh and how he's going to cope. Like, his signings, they seem all right from what I know of them, but they're all pretty much unknowns to me.
Yeah, I feel like Jesse Marsh, he's got that Jurgen Klopp a bit about him where you can just tell players want to play for him. So I'll put that in his credit. He's definitely a guy that knows what he's doing, but is he? I think there is a big question mark over him. He's no Bielsa, that's for sure. But I think some of the signing could be very good, but it's always going to be from an FPL standpoint with Leeds, a bit of a wait and see. I would love to own Bamford at some point over the season, but again, we just don't know how that's going to go over the course of the year.
Yeah, and I think the same can be said for Wolves a bit for me. I think I don't really know. Like pretty much everyone's got Pedro Neto in their teams. I haven't, so that probably means it's the right thing to do. Get him in, but I don't know. Jimenez is now out for looking like potentially a couple of months. Does that hinder or help the Neto ownership debate? I honestly don't know. Is he going to play more further forward? Or
no. So, Always Cheating, one of their podcasts was with FPL Black Wolf, who is a Wolves fan and went into a lot of detail about Wolves. Podence is typically the one that plays in a false 9 position. Now Jimenez is out. But Pedro Neto is their best attacker. I actually think from an FPL standpoint, if you're going to look at Wolves, considering they've got a great opening to the season, you're probably looking at the defenders. Now, Connor Coley is too expensive. 5 million. No, absolutely not. Don't go near him. But Johnny, we know he can pop up with a goal, pop up with an assist, and he's 4.5. So he's definitely worth a shout. It looks like Aït-Nouri is going to be starting as well because his only competition is injured on that side. So we know he can bring attack and returns as well. So I think they could be very good differential picks if you're looking at a 4.5 million defender. But like you, I don't like Wolves going forward. So I'm avoiding Gibbs White. I'm avoiding Neto. I'm avoiding Podence. All are potentially good options if you trust Wolves going forward. I don't. So for me, on FPL, Wolves are a bit of an avoid. But I could very well be wrong, and lots of people are backing Neto.
Yeah, I'm with you. They don't fill me with confidence. The other defender that you didn't mention they've signed from Burnley is Nathan Collins. They've paid about 20 million for him. So is he going to start straight into that starting 11? He's a 4.5 as well. So that's another potential entrance into that Wolves defence. But I think if you're going for a 4.5, you want to be going for someone like Aït-Nouri who's going to be getting forward a bit more.
What I don't like about Wolves as well is long term, their squad is very, very bad. I didn't realise how much they have been overachieving in the past few years. Their squad is really, really not very strong. And I think over the course of the season, I really do expect them to struggle quite a bit, especially in that second half, assuming half the players go and play for Portugal in the World Cup. I think Wolves are a bit of an avoid at the moment.
I'm surprised they kept hold of Ruben Neves, to be honest with you, but
yeah, he's only got a year left or 2 years left on his contract, I think. So he'll probably be off in January, I would expect. Why don't you start by giving your thoughts on Newcastle versus Nottingham Forest then?
Nottingham Forest are a bit of an unknown entity, really, aren't they? So they've made a few good signings, one of which is in my team as things stand, which is Taiwo Awoniyi, who signed from Union Berlin, got about 16 goals in the Bundesliga last season. Obviously signed Nico Williams from Liverpool as well. I think that's a shrewd bit of business potentially. But they're up against the side that probably a lot of people, not even a dark horse anymore, are they? We can't really call them a dark horse now with the amount of money they've spent. So they are potentially the ones to watch this season. They'll be sort of on a lot of people's minds going into these first couple of game weeks, dependent on how they get going. So, I mean, obviously signed Sven Botman, Matt Targett's coming on a permanent deal now, Nick Pope signed as well, plus all the signings they made in January, like Bruno Guimaraes. They've still got St. Maximan, who's obviously a very exciting attacking prospect. The only thing that might hinder them now, which it pains me to say, is that John Joe Shelby's injured, which could mean that Bruno has to play in a slightly more defensive role than he did at the back end of last season when Shelby was being more of that anchor point and he had a bit more freedom to get forward. But if you look at their fullbacks, so you've got Targett and Trippier, they're going to be potentially in a lot of people's drafts, probably only one of them. And then you've got your likes of St. Maximan, you've got Almiron, who's been playing quite well in pre-season as well, picked up a couple of goals at the weekend. So, yeah, Newcastle potentially an exciting team this season.
Agreed. I'm not sure Almiron starts. Bruno Guimaraes, I wouldn't be going near anyway. Even when he was playing further forward, he outperformed his expected goals stat quite considerably. And to me, that shows that he won't be doing it consistently. I think Nick Pope is a fantastic goalkeeper to invest in, considering their start of the season. And at 5 million, he's, for me, the no-brainer there. I love Callum Wilson, but he's not been as good in pre-season as I would have liked, which is why I've gone for Gabriel Jesus. But yeah, I think Newcastle are a really exciting team to own, and I think you should definitely be owning at least one Newcastle asset going into the season, personally.
And who would that be if you could only pick one, regardless of like your actual squad, your template, your thoughts about anything? Who would you say is the best that they could get?
So I think there's two options here, and my thought process I'll explain. So you've got two options: Callum Wilson up front and Nick Pope in defence. Now, Callum Wilson, he's injury prone, but when he plays, he gets goals. Nick Pope, I actually think, could be the top scoring goalkeeper this season. So for me, it's going to be Nick Pope because he's not the most expensive, but he could be the top scoring in his position. Whereas Callum Wilson, I don't think he's going to be the top scoring goalkeeper. Alan St. Max, a great option as well at 6.5 in midfield. But again, I don't think he's going to be the best 6.5 midfielder that we get because Marcus Rashford is also 6.5. So I really do think Nick Pope is the one to own. And I'm going to be entering the season with him as my first choice goalkeeper. That's 99% confirmed.
Fair enough. Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. Speaking of goalkeepers, I didn't even mention, of course, Nottingham Forest signed Dean Henderson on loan, and also Jesse Lingard on a free transfer. So if he can rediscover his form that he had at West Ham a little over a year ago, doing his little dances, potentially he could be a bit of a bargain even.
He is such a nonce, though, isn't he? Right.
I mean, yeah, but
I mean, the 6 million on FPL could be a decent shout later in the season, maybe. Nottingham Forest as well. I do think they overpaid for Neco Williams because he's not very good defensively. Being quite transparent, he was very good going forward, but the reason Fulham didn't sign him, didn't want to take him, is because Fulham want to play with a back four. Forest wants to play with a back five, so he suits Forest a lot better. But he could be a really good asset moving forward. Moving on to the next game, Tottenham Hotspur versus Southampton. Now, we've spoken a lot about Spurs. I think they're really, really good for the new season. Son is probably not someone I would recommend going for, though we've gone for him in our big at the back team. But then you've got Kane, and I really, really like them defensively as well. Not Perisic, but I think Doherty, people are sleeping on him a bit with Perisic signing, and people are forgetting how good he was. He's been starting and looking good in pre-season. I think he's definitely worth a shout to start the season with.
It's going to be a tough one, isn't it? Because it's hard to know exactly which way Conte's thinking in terms of who's going to be his starting fullbacks. Because obviously they've signed Perisic, signed Jed Spence as well. And obviously you've got the guys that were already there, like Reguilon and Doherty. So it might be a matter of waiting and see for the first couple of weeks exactly who's going to make those spots their own. Then you've obviously got Richarlison signed as well. How's he going to fit into this team? And does that mean Kulusevski pulls back a little bit further down and potentially to a wing back? So it's really hard to know.
You know, I don't really buy the Kulusevski going to wing back argument because when Conte was essentially missing a wing back for half of last season or the second half of last season. So he had Reguilon injured, he had on the left, he had Sessegnon injured on the left as well. Doherty was having to play over there. He had Royale injured. He had, I can't remember who else was on the right, but he had basically no starting right backs and 4 starting forwards, and he still didn't move Kulusevski back. So I don't think he sees Kulusevski in a right wing back role. However, I also think Kulusevski, unfortunately, is going to be demoted to the bench, considering the way they play. So I actually really like Doherty. I've got him in my draft at the moment to start the season, but we'll wait and see on that one.
I think the big signing that I really like for them is Yves Bissouma. I think he completely changes their midfield dynamic, and he could really be a big step forward to them challenging. I think they should make top 4 this season.
I totally agree. I think they're probably the best shout for challenging the top 2. Coming on then to Southampton. Now, honestly, how do they get as many points as they do every year? Because every time I see them, I just think this is a rubbish football team.
They're so unconvincing. You look at the team on paper. I think Hassan Hook was a good coach. I think he's a good manager, but it seems to be working with so little, but they still manage to get to that level every season. They've got a big defeat in them every now and then. They've obviously had a couple of 9-0 losses in the last couple of years, so we're hoping to improve on that. But I don't know. I think they could be in the lower echelons of the table come the end of the season.
Yeah, I think they'll avoid relegation because there are worse teams, but I think they will be in the bottom half for sure. Speaking of worse teams in Southampton, the next ones to talk about are Everton and Chelsea. So let's stick with the worst team first. Tell us about Chelsea.
I was waiting for that one. Well, actually, I've just seen recently, as in since we started this podcast, Fabrizio Romano is reporting that Chelsea are on the verge of signing Mark Cucurella. So they seem to have hijacked City's move for him. But obviously, that in terms of FPL, that has a big influence on, because Chelsea's wing backs are like big in FPL. Obviously, you've got James and Chilwell. Whether or not they do start as the two wing backs, if Cucurella comes in, who knows? But Chelsea, potentially an exciting team this season. Sterling's a good signing. I think Koulibaly's an interesting one because he's the wrong side of 30 now and they've paid quite a lot of money for him, but I still think he is a very good defender. What's going to happen with Armando Broja? Is he still going to be there at the start of the season, or is he going to move on somewhere else? Obviously, Lukaku's gone, Christensen's gone, Rudiger's gone, so they've got quite a high turnover of players. It's just a matter of how the new side beds in and starts the season.
I think if I'm looking at Chelsea, I'm actually looking less at the defenders because I don't find them very convincing defensively. So even Reece James, for his price, I'm not too keen on him to start the season with. I think the front three are looking really good in pre-season though, so they're moving very well, and that's Sterling, Havertz, and Mount. Now, Mount is probably the one I'd be most interested in because he's 8 million, and within that nice 8 million price bracket, I think he's a better option than Bukayo Saka or Kulusevski. So that's where I'd be thinking if I was thinking about Chelsea and their assets. And they have a very, very, very tasty opening fixture against Frank Lampard's Everton side.
I don't know. Potentially. I think Mount's a good player, but he's often a flat track bully, so maybe it is a good time to get him in against an Everton side. An Everton side who haven't really done much over the summer. They've signed Tarkowski on a free transfer and they've paid a lot of money for Dwight McNeil, who got 1 assist in the Premier League last season. And obviously, like you said earlier, their pre-season hasn't gone particularly well. So, potentially you could load up on Chelsea attacking assets this weekend. Sterling is always a tempter for me, but he is probably just a little bit too expensive.
Yeah, I agree. I initially had Sterling in my draft as soon as he moves over, but then I thought it's just maybe not quite worth it. It's more of a wait and see. I think Everton have a lot of players. I mean, they've just signed James Tarkowski. They've still got Michael Keane. Mikalenko's still there, but I just don't think they've got enough to do anything within the league. And I think with Frank Lampard, he's a really, really poor football manager, as we all know very well. They've been linked with Max Cornet as well, or Cornet, as State from North versus South would say. But they've been linked with Max Cornet, who, again, it feels like another luxury player for them. They signed the likes of Dele Alli, Van der Beek, etc., and these players did absolutely nothing. So I just think it's a perfect summary of Frank Lampard. He's all style, no substance, and I think they're going to really, really struggle again this season.
Yeah, they've lost Richarlison, obviously, and I don't think they've replaced the goals that he brings to them. As much as we sort of say he's not a particularly great player, he's a sort of talismanic player in that Everton side of the last few years, and you feel like, especially when Calvert-Lewin was injured a lot, he was their main source of goals. So they're going to be relying a hell of a lot on Calvert-Lewin this season, especially if they don't bring anyone else in, because they haven't replaced those goals with Dwight McNeil, let me tell you that.
Yeah, completely agree. But even, I think Richarlison, as much as we dislike him as a player, the way he played is he drags them through some really, really tough phases last season. And I don't think they've got that this season. So I think they'll be very reliant on other teams doing worse than them rather than them doing enough to stay up, frankly, this year.
I agree, yeah.
Looking at the Sunday fixtures then for this upcoming weekend, the first one to talk about is Leicester versus Brentford, which I think is a really, really interesting and exciting game. Leicester I think they're in a bit of mini turmoil if you look at their fans and the way they're acting over the summer. They haven't really signed anyone. They've just had to back a 40 million bid for Maddison from Newcastle. So Maddison's probably said privately he wants to leave. So I think Leicester are in a bit of trouble. And as far as I'm concerned, that's what you get for not starting Iheanacho every week.
It's karma, but I mean, yeah, like if you do the looks on Twitter, you can see everyone is very unhappy with the way things go. They haven't signed anyone so far this summer, which if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards in the Premier League because everyone else is constantly upgrading and making moves in the transfer market. So they're going to be struggling here if they don't sign anyone before the deadline. Obviously, they've got some very good players. We all know that. Vardy is good at this level, but he's only getting older. James Maddison is a very good player. Harvey Barnes has had a good season. Dewsbury Hall comes through last season and looked like he's really hit the ground running. But I think Ricardo Pereira's picked up an injury in pre-season as well. They need to make some signings, but I think maybe the money just isn't there.
Yeah, perhaps. Pereira being injured means James Justin is guaranteed to start. If you want a differential 4.5, we love James Justin. Go Justin forever. But they're actually coming up against a Brentford side without Christian Eriksen. Now, before Eriksen signs for Brentford, they were the worst team in the league. They've made a couple of signings. So Ben Mee from Burnley has now gone over. Goalkeeper from Lazio as well as backup. Then I think they've signed Hickey from Bologna in Serie A. And the guy with the greatest name in football, or the most English name, Keane Lewis Potter, has come in from Hull City for just over 15 million. I don't really know much about them, but I feel like they're very Brentford players. So low Premier League, maybe high Championship. I think Brentford are going to be in a lot of trouble this season, being quite transparent. And everyone's putting them as 12th, 11th, top 10. I think they're probably second season syndrome favourites.
I agree. It's going to be tough for them this season. Ben Mee's coming in. Ben Mee is an all right defender, but he was always the second best defender in the central defensive partnership at Burnley. King Lewis Potter is meant to be a very good player. He's still young. He's only 21, and he has done well in the Championship for Hull over the last year. If he does anything like Jared Bowen stepping up from the Championship to the Premier League, the last Hull player to do that, then if he's half as good as he's been in the last season, then he'll be a decent signing. But I agree. I think second season syndrome is a big thing, and it's going to be really tough for them. They haven't really made big signings. I know Brentford have this really stats-driven approach to their signings, which has worked really well for them in the past. Losing Christian Eriksen is massive because the influence he had when he signed was huge, and I don't think they've really reproduced that creativity. They haven't filled that gap. So, and with Tony and Mbeumo, I feel like it's a very underwhelming strike partnership. I think Tony's a good player, but I don't think there's going to be enough chances created for him.
I think he needs other players around him to make him better. And when he's got the right players around him, like Eriksen, he becomes a really, really good player. But I just don't see it. I'm not inspired at all by anyone from Brentford. From an FPL standpoint, if you're going to go for one, you're going to go for Raya. But again, it's very, very uninspiring, I feel.
That's a payment for me. I might go for Tony. I can't see it myself.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. Next game to talk about is going to be Manchester United versus Brighton. Now, Man U, I think we all know what happened last season in this fixture in particular. It was very, very entertaining. But I'd hope they're a different team under Erik ten Hag. Well, I don't, because it was hilarious. But I'd expect they're a bit of a team under Erik ten Hag. I think from an FPL standpoint, we both love Sancho. He's been really good in pre-season, and I think second season he could really come into his own, probably ahead of Rashford, I would say. But I think both are very good options for the season.
Yeah, I think if they can reproduce the form that they look like they've been showing in pre-season, they're definitely contenders. You obviously spoke last week about Bruno Fernandes potentially coming more back into the fold with the turmoil ongoing around Ronaldo at the moment. He did play in pre-season at the weekend, but he played 45 minutes and left Old Trafford before the game had finished. So it's not looking good for his future there. He obviously is still he stated his desire to still play in the Champions League. Ten Hag's making his own signings now. He's bringing in players that he's worked with before. Lisandro Martinez has just come in as well. Christian Eriksen's obviously come in. So it's going to be interesting to see how they fit in, because there's going to be a sort of a relatively high turnover in this squad going into the first week of the season. But I mean, I do like to see Man U struggle, because it is very funny. But also, I would like to see them improve, because I think from an FPL standpoint, there's some good value there to be had, like with the likes of players that we've said, like Rashford and Sancho.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think from an FPL standpoint, Man U are a fun team to invest in as well. At the start of last season, Bruno, if you remember, got 20 points in the first game week. So I think it's very fun to invest in cheap Man U players and watching them do well, and not that many people will be on them. So it makes them nice differentials. I've punted on Sancho first week of the season, so I think you're probably going to as well. Maybe you're not, who knows?
You'll find out at the end of this podcast.
Excellent. Well, let's talk about Brighton then, because I think there's a potential for Brighton, even though they're losing Cucurella, even though they've lost Basuma. I think defensively, you probably aren't going near them, and that includes the goalkeeper Sanchez. But going forward, they play some very good football. They've got that Undav that they've just signed, and I saw that Trossard just got a hat-trick in pre-season. Could be very underrated at 6.5.
I'm never going to have Trossard in my team, just because I think he is awful. I just can't trust Brighton strikers. Him and Mopé, I just cannot trust at all. Undav, if he can find a place in this starting 11, I think he's got potential just based off his numbers playing in Belgium last season. He does seem a little bit more exciting, but I don't know, just in general, Brighton don't excite me enough to really have any of them in my team.
I agree, and it's quite boring, isn't it? And their start to the season isn't great either. The first 3 games are Man U away, then it's Newcastle at home, then it's West Ham away. So a really difficult opening. After that, it gets a bit better with Leeds, Fulham, Leicester and Bournemouth. So maybe if you're looking at Brighton players, you can afford to wait until game week 4-ish.
Game week 3, they always beat West Ham.
Okay, that's true. So you can afford to wait until game week 3-ish for Brighton. 2 more teams to speak about then, and the first one is going to be West Ham. Now, you're the one to give your opinion on this, because you're going to be the subject matter expert.
I will be avoiding any West Ham assets at the start of the season, although actually, to be fair, I think in my current draft, Declan Rice is in there as like a bench fodder at the end, because he's going to get 2 points every week. So,
just get Andreas Pereira.
Nah, that's well more boring. Declan Rice is more fun. But I mean, we made a few signings. Areola's come in. It's going to be interesting to see if he takes that number 1 spot in the league this season over Fabianski. I suspect that is what we're going to lean towards, and Fabianski is going to be the cup keeper. Naif Aguirre come in as a centre-back, but it looks like he's going to be out until potentially after the World Cup now, after he's injured his ankle against Rangers in pre-season. And we've finally signed a striker after about 2 years. We've finally signed a striker. Gianluca Scamacca from Sassuolo. I don't think he'll be starting in that first week. I think Antonio will still have that starting berth, but obviously Scamacca will get his time. Be interested to see how it goes. There was interest from PSG. There was interest from Juventus. So I'd like to think he's an all right player. Judging by the classic YouTube compilation highlights, he looks an absolute baller, but everyone looks good on YouTube. So it's going to be interesting to see how we start this season. I still feel like we need one or 2 more signings, but wouldn't be touching any West Ham assets at the start here, just because of the run of fixtures we've got at the start of the season.
Can I just correct one thing you said? You said everyone looks good on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, then feel free to comment correcting Matt here.
I meant footballers look good on YouTube. We look awful.
We look awful on YouTube and everywhere else. Last team to really talk about then is Manchester City. And I think with Man City, you just need to be invested. Their start of the season is so good. They, according to the fixture difficulty rating, they haven't got any hard games in the first 7. I think Man City, you should be doubled or trebled up on them. You've got defensive options in Walker if you want to be cheap, Diaz, Laporte and Cancelo if you want to spend a bit more. You've got midfield options aplenty. So Grealish has started every game in pre-season. KDB's guaranteed 90 minutes every week. Mahrez could be a potential option, but you never know with his minutes. And then up front, of course, you've got Haaland, who admittedly he didn't do great against Liverpool, but he still has an XG of 1.6. Now, you're getting an XG of 1.6 against the best side you'll play against all season. you're obviously doing something right. And that team is designed to put the ball in at Haaland's feet. So I think keep the faith if you had Haaland before. He will turn out very, very well, especially with these opening fixtures.
Yeah, if he gets enough chances, he'll score goals. He's done it everywhere he's been. So, and he's still only 21. I feel like that's really overlooked because it feels like he's been a big name for a good couple of years now. But he is still only 21. He's coming into a new league. I think he's got all of the physical attributes you need to be a good striker in the Premier League. And like you say, they will create chances for him. You look at the players that he's got surrounding him, chances will be aplenty. So I think he will score bags of goals this season.
Totally agree. I think there was almost a bit of a rush to get him out of the team after the Community Shield and get Kane in. I think that is a mistake. Haaland and Kane are both really, really good options, but I personally am thinking of switching between the two, but I think both are very good. City are the best team in the league, unquestionably, no doubt whatsoever. You've got arguably the best players surrounded by the rest of the best players, essentially, in KDB, surrounded by the likes of B. Silva, Jack Grealish, Phil Foden, etc. So I think they're a really, really strong team to invest in. And that is our Game Week 1 preview. So, Matt, why don't you talk us through where you are with your drafts? Because this is the last podcast we do before we start the season. So tell us where you're sitting at the moment.
Excited times, eh? I currently am sat with my starting 11 of Nick Pope in goal, a back five, because you've got to have a back five because we're big at the back, of Trent Alexander-Arnold, Ben Chilwell, Andrew Robertson, Alexander Zinchenko, and Ruben Diaz. 3 across the middle of Luis Diaz, Jack Grealish, and Jadon Sancho, and a front 2 of Erling Haaland and Gabriel Jesus. My bench is Caballero, Odegaard, Awanui, and Declan Rice. So that's where I'm at the moment. Armband on Haaland. So we will see. I just feel like if I captain someone that's playing West Ham, it can probably only end well for me because either he'll score a hat-trick or he won't. But, if he doesn't, then I'm probably quite happy. But then again, he'll probably blank and we'll lose 4-0.
To be very clear to all of our listeners, Matt is 100% changing that team up because there's no way he goes in without Salah. I'm calling it.
Well, we will see. I'm very determined just to be a contrarian.
There's no way you go into the season without Salah. No chance. And you don't want a 6.5 player on your bench. That's ridiculous. So my team is a bit more reasonable and probably a bit closer to what I'll start the season with. Nick Pope in goal, I've already spoken about. I think he'll be great. Robertson and Trent at the back alongside Doherty. I spoke earlier that I really, really like him as an option, and Walker as well because I want to be cheap. Across the midfield, it's currently sitting as Martinelli, Grealish, Sancho, and Salah with the captain's armbands on. And up front is Gabriel Jesus and Harry Kane. My tentative plan is to go Kane to Haaland for game week 2, and then Haaland to Kane again for game week 3, and just almost swap them around interchangeably. Whether I stick to that or not, who knows? On the bench, I've got Ward as the goalkeeper because he's very likely to be Leicester's starting keeper at 4.0 million. Then I've got Leon Bailey, Nico Williams, and Archer for Aston Villa. The reason I haven't gone Greenwood for Leeds is because I think he'll get a price drop because so many people have got him straight out the blocks as a 4.5 striker. So I went for Archer instead on the basis that he may get minutes, but I don't really care if he does as a third sub.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think it's. I think we've both got good squads. It's going to be interesting to see if I do stick without Salah to see how we go.
There's no way versus a promoted side you don't have Mo Salah. If anything,
Diaz is better. Diaz is better, mate. Don't know what you're talking about. Diaz is better.
You may captain Haaland, but you want to have Salah just so you don't get too badly burned if he does go off.
No, he's going to blank.
We'll wait and see then.
You heard it here first. He's going to go off injured after 10 minutes. Tim Ream's going to snap him.
Expert insights from Matthew Higgins. Thank you all for joining us. We're going to be watching the first game on Friday night. Get involved with the conversation on Twitter. It's so fun interacting with you all. We can be found at Big at the Back.
Yeah, and you can find me at Higgins92 and Tom is at TomMadden92. Yeah, we're going to be watching the game here on Friday night, having a good few beers, I'm sure, having a good time. Get in touch with us on Twitter. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube as well. Hit the notification bell so you get a notification whenever we upload a new video. And you can also find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. So if you want to listen to us in the podcast version while you're going out for your walk or run, why not do that instead?
Worth also noting as well that we do have an FPL league. It's the Big at the Back podcast league. We'd love all of you to join in. So the code to join that is Oscar Whiskey Yankee Golf Hotel Alpha. Other than that, that's all we've got time for. We can't wait to speak to all of you and get the season started.